The conference room fell silent the moment the door opened. Every eye turned toward the exhausted man standing in the doorway with rainwater dripping from his worn jacket, his shirt wrinkled from rushing across the city, and a backpack hanging over one shoulder that clearly did not belong in a corporate office. Before he could even catch his breath, the young CEO looked at him with cold disappointment, shook her head, and dismissed him with a few humiliating words in front of everyone. She believed she was teaching a careless employee a lesson. She had no idea she had just embarrassed the only person who could save the company her late father had spent his entire life building. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness, second chances, and judging people by their character instead of appearances still matter, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel Hardworking Dad. Your support helps stories like this reach more people. Morning sunlight stretched across the city as people hurried toward offices, schools, and coffee shops. It was the kind of bright day that promised opportunity, yet for Rowan Mercer every morning began with a race against time. His alarm had sounded before dawn, but life rarely followed a perfect schedule. His 7-year-old daughter, Hazel, had awakened with a fever, and the babysitter who usually helped before school had called to say her own child was sick. Rowan had no family nearby and no one else to call. Like countless single parents, he carried every responsibility alone. Years earlier, Rowan's wife had passed away after a sudden illness that changed everything in a matter of months. Since then, every day became a balancing act between earning enough to provide for Hazel and making sure she never felt abandoned. He packed lunches, braided messy hair after watching countless online tutorials, read bedtime stories even when exhaustion blurred the words, and quietly cried only after his daughter had fallen asleep. His dreams had become smaller but somehow more meaningful. He no longer chased promotions or recognition. His greatest success was seeing Hazel smile despite everything they had lost. Professionally, Rowan was considered one of the most gifted structural systems engineers in the region. His reputation wasn't built on flashy presentations or expensive suits but on solving impossible problems that others had already given up on. He accepted temporary consulting assignments because they offered flexibility for caring for Hazel. Stability came second to fatherhood. That particular morning, however, everything seemed determined to go wrong. Heavy traffic followed a train delay, and then Hazel's fever returned halfway to school, forcing Rowan to stop at a neighborhood clinic before finally arriving nearly 25 minutes late for an emergency executive meeting at Sterling Dynamics, a manufacturing company struggling through its worst financial crisis in decades. The company's newly appointed CEO, Celeste Whitmore, had inherited leadership after her father suffered a devastating stroke several months earlier. Intelligent, ambitious, and fiercely determined to prove herself, Celeste believed discipline was the foundation of success. She expected perfection from everyone because she demanded nothing less from herself. Unfortunately, somewhere along the way, determination had quietly transformed into impatience. When Rowan entered the conference room, Celeste barely looked up from the financial report spread across the polished table. What she saw was not a respected consultant. She saw an employee arriving late with untidy clothes and tired eyes. Without asking a single question, she criticized him in front of senior executives, questioning his professionalism and suggesting that people who couldn't manage their own schedules had no business solving multi-million-dollar problems. Several executives lowered their eyes in discomfort. Rowan remained silent. Experience had taught him that defending himself against assumptions rarely changed minds. Instead of arguing, he quietly apologized for being late, took the available seat near the back, and began reviewing the technical documents placed before him. His calm response only convinced Celeste that she had been right. The meeting revealed an even darker reality. Sterling Dynamics had only weeks before defaulting on critical contracts. Their primary production facility contained structural failures that threatened to halt manufacturing completely. Multiple engineering firms had examined the issue, each offering expensive renovations requiring almost a year of downtime. The company simply did not have that kind of time or money. As experts presented increasingly hopeless projections, Rowan quietly studied every blueprint, every maintenance record, and every inspection report. His pencil moved steadily across blank paper while others debated. When everyone finished speaking, the room settled into uncomfortable silence. Rowan finally raised his head. Rather than proposing another costly reconstruction, he outlined an entirely different approach. Years of overlooked stress points had created a chain reaction that everyone had mistaken for separate failures. Instead of replacing entire production lines, strategic reinforcement of several overlooked structural sections combined with redesigned load distribution could stabilize the entire facility within 6 weeks at less than one-third the estimated cost. The room remained silent. Not because they disagreed. Because every calculation appeared remarkably accurate. Senior engineers began reviewing his figures. One after another, skeptical expressions slowly transformed into astonishment. Questions became discussions. Discussions became excitement. For the first time in months, hope entered the building. Celeste watched as experienced engineers praised Rowan's analysis with genuine admiration. She realized she had spent less than 30 seconds judging a man whose expertise exceeded nearly everyone in the room. Still, pride kept her from apologizing. Implementation began immediately. Over the following weeks Rowan worked longer hours than anyone else. Yet every evening, no matter how demanding the project became, he left precisely on time. Many employees whispered that he lacked commitment. They never saw him racing across town to prepare dinner, help with homework, and comfort a little girl still learning to live without her mother. One afternoon Celeste happened to leave the office early for a meeting across town. While stopping near a neighborhood pharmacy, she noticed Rowan kneeling beside a small child, carefully tying her shoelaces before carrying a bag filled with medicine. The little girl smiled despite looking pale. Rowan brushed hair away from her forehead with remarkable tenderness before making her laugh over something only the two of them understood. Celeste remained inside her car long after they disappeared around the corner. For the first time she saw not the late consultant. She saw a father carrying the weight of two parents. The following day curiosity led her to quietly review Rowan's employment history. She discovered decades of extraordinary engineering achievements. Prestigious awards declined because they required extensive travel, and repeated decisions to reject executive positions offering higher salaries but less time with his daughter. Every sacrifice traced back to one reason: family. That evening Celeste visited her father in the rehabilitation center where recovery remained painfully slow. Though speech had become difficult, his eyes still reflected wisdom built across 40 years of leadership. She described Rowan. Before she even finished, her father managed a weak smile. He recognized the name immediately. Years earlier Rowan had solved a critical infrastructure failure for another company, quietly saving hundreds of jobs without ever seeking public recognition. Her father had admired not only his brilliance but his humility. Then came words that stayed with Celeste forever. A company can recover from financial losses. It rarely recovers after losing respect for good people. The sentence echoed in her thoughts all night. The following morning she arrived before sunrise. When Rowan entered carrying coffee and reviewing construction updates, Celeste asked everyone else to leave the conference room. For several long moments she struggled to find the right words. Leadership had always come naturally. Apologizing had not. She admitted she had judged him unfairly. She acknowledged that she never asked why he had been late. She confessed that success had made her impatient with people whose battles she could not see. Rowan accepted the apology without resentment. Life had already taught him that everyone carried invisible burdens. Over the next month the restoration progressed ahead of schedule. Investors regained confidence. Contracts remained intact. Hundreds of employees kept their jobs. Families across the community avoided unemployment because one father refused to let bitterness replace compassion. When the final inspections confirmed the facility's stability, the board celebrated what newspapers called an engineering miracle. Awards were suggested. Media interviews were arranged. Rowan quietly requested that recognition instead be shared with the entire engineering team. Nothing about him had changed. He still arrived each morning carrying the same weathered backpack. He still hurried home every evening. He still measured success by whether Hazel smiled during bedtime stories. Several months later, Sterling Dynamics established a scholarship honoring practical innovation and resilient families. At Celeste's request, the first scholarship carried Rowan's name, not because he had saved a factory, but because he reminded everyone that greatness often arrives wearing ordinary clothes and carrying invisible responsibilities. Hazel eventually recovered completely, and life settled into a peaceful rhythm. She often visited the company during family events, proudly introducing herself as the daughter of the smartest dad in the whole world. Employees smiled every time because they secretly agreed. Celeste herself changed as a leader. Meetings no longer began with criticism but with questions. Employees facing family emergencies found understanding instead of punishment. Flexible schedules became available for parents and caregivers. Productivity unexpectedly increased because people worked hardest for leaders who respected them as human beings. Years later, when business schools invited Celeste to speak about leadership, she rarely discussed profits or market strategies first. Instead, she shared the story of the rainy morning when she nearly pushed away the one person her father's company desperately needed. She reminded every audience that credentials can be hidden beneath worn jackets, courage can be disguised as exhaustion, and extraordinary people often look completely ordinary until someone takes the time to understand them. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad for more inspiring stories that remind us why compassion always matters. Special request: before you leave, comment below with the words, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe every person deserves understanding before judgment. Because every delayed arrival has a story. Every tired face carries unseen battles. Every struggling parent is fighting a war most people never notice. And sometimes, the person standing quietly in the back of the room isn't the weakest one there. Sometimes, they are the reason everyone else still has hope tomorrow. The greatest leaders are not remembered for the moments they exercised authority. They are remembered for the moments they chose compassion over assumptions, humility over pride, and understanding over judgment. In a world that rushes to label people by what it sees in a single moment, may we all remember to pause long enough to discover the story hidden beneath the surface. That single choice has the power to save careers, restore families, rebuild companies, and remind us that humanity will always be our greatest strength.